What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Blazers Uprise Live. We got maybe the funnest stream we've ever done on the streaming channel because we're going to be talking about Olshey saying some good things for once. Never thought I'd say Olshey said a good thing, but Olshey, his press conference today gives me hope for the season. It was phenomenal. Eric rewatched it, took notes. Eric prepared for that. I also set up a Photoshop file where we can create lineups. So literally we're going to dedicate a segment of this stream to creating lineups to basically, and I'll take feedback from you guys, but we're going to create a couple different lineups, start a season lineup, then when Collins comes back, what's it going to look like, and then once playoffs roll around, like who would probably be out of the rotation, how would we tighten up rotation, that type of thing. We're going to talk about that, and we'll talk about the Harry Giles signing, which I am very excited about. I was watching back a mailbag from like a couple months ago, and somebody asked about a Harry Giles signing, and I was thinking, okay, that would be like Harry Giles with part of the mid-level exception to be our full-time backup center, and I was like, he's intriguing, but not the guy I want to have to rely on as being a part of our rotation. But we signed him. We're not going to have to rely on him. We signed him as like a flyer to be like a third-string big. Phenomenal pickup. Like he'd be ready to step in right away. He's young, very intriguing. We'll talk about Wenyen going to the Pelicans. I'm happy that he got an NBA contract as well. We'll talk about all that. So what's going on, chat? How's your day been? How's everybody doing? How am I a good liar? Kyle Wilson, he said I should become a politician because I'm a good liar. What am I lying about? I don't lie. I don't know how to lie. The fact that he mentioned not all of defensive issues was personnel was funny. Yes, that's exactly what we're going to talk about with Olshey, is that he kind of put the onus on Stotts. We're going to start off with that. So Olshey had a press conference today talking about the offseason. This happens after every offseason where he kind of takes questions and recaps what they were trying to do. And let me just say this before we get into like some of the comments and how they pertain to Stotts. The one thing I do like about Olshey is that he targeted specific types of players. He targeted defensive players, It was like he had a plan and he executed it. Even though, I might have a couple questions about, a guy or two here and there, he knew what he wanted to do and he executed his plan. So it wasn't like, oh, we're going to go out and try and just sign a big-name free agent, so let's go try and sign Chandler Parsons to a max contract. Oh, we didn't get Chandler Parsons, let's sign Evan Turner to $18 million. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know. It just seemed like this offseason, more than most, he had a very sound plan. I'm not saying he didn't have a plan in past offseasons. It just seems like he had he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he did it.
Well, hi, Mom. So he actually talked about that. He said, so with Paul, we talked about this before, the differences between Paul Allen meddling. He said that Paul would call him like every day and talk about like every team's moves and wondering like if we should have done that or like how do you think that move will affect them in the playoff race, and just wanted to talk basketball with him all the time. And he said that with Jody, she just wants to hear you give your plan and then execute that plan, right? Yeah. So he said that it's not like Allen where you just go out and try to sign whatever free agent you can or whatever, and you just try, like you said. You go after a Chandler Parsons, that doesn't work. You go to your next target, that doesn't work, whatever. But, like, he said, like, she just wants to hear your plan. She usually approves it because, if you do your homework and you lay it out for her properly. And then she wants to win, and she wants you to execute that plan. She's going to hold you accountable, but she's also not going to get in your way from trying to execute that plan. So I feel like he's been kind of freed up to actually execute the plan he wants fully. I'm not saying like any of his signings are excusable because of that or anything like that, but there is sometimes when you just have one person in charge doing the plan, it sometimes goes a little smoother than having a bunch of people trying to get on the same page when they're not.
Yeah, and let me just say this, because like the most, I forget the word, but kind of the boldest move was probably the Derrick Jones Jr. mid-level exception signing, just in terms of, some fans liked it, some fans didn't like it. At the time, I hated it, all right? I thought he was a bad defender. So it was like, okay, we got a guy that can't shoot and can't play defense. Why in the world? Yeah, and you did correct me. And I don't know why I thought he was a bad defender. I have a pretty good feel for who's good defensively in the NBA and who's bad, but that was one of those guys that I thought he was a bad defender, mostly just because, like, he's so skinny. But no, he's a good defender. The problem is he can't shoot. But the first thing I said after my first thing I reacted to, my first reaction was, why Derrick Jones Jr.? He's a terrible fit. It wasn't that necessarily like he sucks, right? Yeah. It was that he's a terrible fit because of how Terry Stotts uses forwards. He kind of just parks them in the corners. So I was like, okay, why did we get Derrick Jones Jr.? Olshey, why are you getting Stotts, a guy who he's not going to utilize, right? Which probably shouldn't blame Olshey too much for that. Should blame Stotts, but it was just kind of like, going into that is like, okay, Stotts isn't going to change anything, so why would you get a guy who doesn't fit his offensive system at all, right? That's why I was frustrated, and should hold Stotts more accountable and Olshey less accountable than that, but they should be working together. So that's why it's just like, what in the world? Why? It didn't make sense to me. But I've grown more on the side just because he is a good defender. And, let me just say this about his jump shot before we get into, how he could properly be utilized, right? His jump shot, I've noticed, I think the only real issue with it is he has a weird elbow hitch. His shooting elbow isn't smooth on release. I noticed that between, the regular season during February, March, that time span before the hiatus, and his play in the bubble, he reduced that hitch. His jump shot was a lot smoother in the bubble compared to before the bubble, from what I noticed, from some of the footage I watched. Who knows if that'll translate to him being like a 33% three-point shooter or whatever, but I noticed that his shot was smoother and a little bit more arc. So, okay, that's something he is hopefully working on and hopefully translates to better shooting. But regardless, the best way this guy's going to be utilized is as a guy who's cutting and moving off the ball. And Olshey had some comments about and I was shocked to hear this. Olshey had comments about basically how the team needs to be ran from a coaching standpoint, which I've never really heard him make comments like that. So why don't you summarize that, Eric, and just give me your thoughts on that, and then how that, because I assume his comments gave you more hope in the Derrick Jones Jr. signing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and me as well. So just kind of tie all that together for us.
Yeah. Before I get into that, so it did give me hope about the Derrick Jones Jr. signing. I still think in the long run it might have been better to have a more balanced player, and just the cap implications for going forward, this was probably our best avenue to sign a free agent over the next few years. So that's mostly where my disappointment lied, just finding a piece that didn't fit. Until I hear Olshey basically straight up tell Stotts, okay, I got you the pieces. It was if you want to blame me for last year for personnel, but I'm not going to let you have that excuse this year. So
yeah. Eric's obviously paraphrasing, but that's what I took away from his press conference as well.
But he flat out said, I take responsibility for the personnel, but we need to address strategic issues on our defense as well. He flat out said that. So, and I loved hearing that. He said they needed to be more aggressive on defense, which is something you and I.
Yeah, let's pat ourselves on the back for that one, because we were saying that all season long, and Olshey agrees with us, man.
Yeah. So, to me, okay, so if we're just going to be assuming that Neil and Terry are on the same page, and that Olshey's just going out and getting free agents and then letting Neil do his thing, or letting Terry do his thing, and not really holding him accountable for what he does and then giving him extensions and all that stuff. It seemed like it was just a good relationship, but they didn't really work well together, but they never really had conflict either. So seeing Olshey like actually put Stotts on the hot seat, basically.
Yeah.
Not in like a firing way, but like I gave you the players. So Olshey said at the very beginning they wanted to be more switchable. They wanted to be more athletic. They wanted to be better defending on the perimeter with their forwards. And he went out and identified Robert Covington as his number one target using he basically said he had Ariza and 2 first-round picks, and he had a list of players that he was willing to trade that for. He said Robert Covington was his first. Based on his comments about being more athletic, I think we could probably assume that Aaron Gordon was on that list as well. So I'm thankful that we got Robert Covington instead of Aaron Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it was just a breath of fresh air to hear this guy be honest both about his performance and how his coach needs to improve with the players that he has now given him.
Yeah, I've been waiting for Olshey to have a press conference like this his entire time here. He's basically just putting the onus on Stotts. Like, okay, I gave you the players. You have no more excuses. You have no more excuses for mediocre defense. I gave you depth. You don't really have the same excuses for injuries. You're not going to have to rely on a Mario Hezonja or Tolliver level player. Like, literally, the Blazers might have the best 10th through 13th men in the entire NBA. I don't know who you would say is the 10th man, but like, what, Collins, Melo, whoever, like, I would probably, like, if everybody's healthy, probably maybe say Melo. Melo's the best 10th man in the league, though.
I'd probably say Giles until he proves.
Well, Giles is the 11th man, isn't he?
Oh, right, yeah. Well, Collins would be 10, Giles 11. At least until he's back, Collins. But, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm saying if healthy, right? Because Collins will be back. January, February, I don't know. At some point, Collins will be back. Like, whether you consider Collins or Anthony the 10th man, that's probably the best 10th man in the league. Harry Giles as your 11th man might be the best 11th man in the league, because this guy was, like, solid last year. This guy was like, I feel like he was really underrated last year. He was productive, and he's still young, so he should improve a little bit. Is just... I feel like he's still kind of trying to get his legs under him and trying to get back to like the type of prospect he was in high school, because he's a number one prospect. Your 12th man is Nasir Little or Anthony Simons. Like, that's pretty good. And 13th man is one of those two as well. That's pretty good. Like, best 10th through 13th men. So if we have like 2-3 injuries, there's still no excuse for this team to not perform at a high level because of how much depth we have. So he addressed the defensive issues and he addressed the depth issues where there's no excuses left. Now it's time to perform. Now it's time for this team to play up to a higher level than they ever did last season. If that doesn't happen, I feel like, honestly, like, people will start to realize maybe some of the things that we were critical of Stotts for, right? It puts us in a win-win scenario because either, okay, Stotts changes things up and has a really good roster and we win a ton of games, or people that we never thought would have criticized Stotts might actually start holding him to a higher standard, which would be cool. You know, I'd rather have the first, and I'd rather have this team just win a bunch of games, but now it's time where I see people that were super critical of Olshey and never criticized Stotts. Now they're saying, Olshey had a phenomenal offseason. Stotts needs... there's no excuses left for Stotts. And it's people that I never would have thought would ever say something like that. And it's kind of cool. Like, it's awesome, you know. Maybe we'll have a lot of people agree with us. Maybe people will actually respect our opinion. Hopefully we're not critiquing the coach, because if Stotts improves, like, we're not going to sit there critiquing him if he improves, right? We don't want to, like, be negative towards Stotts. We just try and break it down like how we see it. So if he improves and does a decent job coaching, we'll say he does a decent job coaching.
I think the best way I can paraphrase that is, we didn't like the signing because we don't feel like Stotts will make the necessary adjustments. Mm-hmm. But today, Olshey basically told him he better make those adjustments. So now I like it because Neil basically got this guy. He's saying he's an excellent defender. He's one of the top defenders at his position. If you can't utilize him and make your defense better, along with Robert Covington, who's one of the top wing defenders in the NBA and one of the best help defenders in the entire league, you have these two guys. If you can't make that work with a good defending center in Nurkic and other good defenders like Gary Trent's coming on as a defender, like if you can't make that defense into a good defense and start doing stuff, he's basically saying like that's on you, dude. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what I love. It's like now Stotts is in a position where he has to change or he's gone basically, because if he just runs the same stuff and the defense struggles, Stotts or Olshey is going to be like, dude, what? Like you have all these pieces. Like, why is the defense not good? And I love that because that'll make them have to work hard, make them have to look at more film and figure out what's going on. And it'll improve just organically by having better players, of course. That's what's funny. You can't ever say anything about the personnel because then when the personnel gets better, people will say like, oh, well, the personnel's better. But like, obviously better players make the personnel better. But like when you go against the tough part for me is even if the regular season's great, it's still going to come down to if we play differently in the playoffs because we need to adjust the way we play. We need to play more aggressive on defense, like Olshey said, and we need to feature more movement off ball. And that's been a huge problem in every playoff series we've lost over the past 4 years, and that needs to change.
Yeah, but that does start in the regular season. You know, we have seen those issues during the regular season. You know, it's not just something that pops up during the playoffs. It's like we were last in assists during the regular season last year. Our movement wasn't good. We didn't change up our defense hardly at all during the regular season. We only changed it up against the Houston Rockets, and the results were good. And so that's the thing is it'll give me hope if I see consistent change. Here's the thing. Stotts has like changed a little bit to start seasons and then has like kind of regressed back to what he normally likes to do and like regressed back to just an isolation pick and roll heavy offense. So if we see like a differently ran team for the first 8 games, I'm still not fully confident that that's going to last because we have seen that in years past and it has kind of wilted away as the season went on and we regressed back to our normal style of play. So I need to see it like throughout the season, you know, to be fully confident that, okay, this team is playing a better brand of basketball, a brand that is more conducive for postseason success. Who knows who we get? Maybe we make a splash trade at the deadline. I still don't know the protections on that first-round pick we traded for Covington. It'd be nice to know. But who knows who we get at the deadline? Maybe we make a splash move and have an even better roster than we do now. But it's just going to come down to what type of basketball are we playing? Are we moving guys? Are we cutting? Are we playing aggressive defense? Are we changing up our schemes? If we're doing that, this team has a ton of potential, and this is probably going to be the best team from a talent standpoint and from a coaching standpoint that Dame has ever had. And I just want to see like what that type of like a well-coached team that's put together like this, I want to see what that does in the playoffs because I have a feeling that team could maybe scare the Los Angeles Lakers, right? I know the Los Angeles Lakers are more talented, but if you have a guy like Dame, if you have a guy like CJ, if you have defenders to put up against the Lakers and they're coached well, you have a chance in that series. You have a chance to contend. So Olshey's comments today gave me a lot of hope that, okay, Stotts has more pressure than ever on him to have a good coaching season, to change, to not be stuck in his ways. Because if he coaches like how he did last year, this team will be a bottom 4 seed in the West. It'll be a bottom 4 seed in the West. Like, I know they're better, but if he coaches how he did last year, this defense won't be as good as it should be. This offense won't really work with a guy like a Derrick Jones Jr. in the lineup. Okay? So he has to improve in order to like really take this team up to its potential, to get this team to play to its potential. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for this year because of just the roster, and then those comments just have me excited just to see, okay, his stock's going to change.
And to your point about getting off to a good start and not necessarily banking on that, Olshey did address a little bit of the importance of starting well. He said that in the seasons that they've gotten a higher seed, they haven't struggled out of the gates and gotten off to a bad start. So you're fighting uphill all year. So he said it was crucial for them to have a good record, and that happened in the last 2 years of Aldridge's tenure here too. We got off to really good starts those seasons, and it helped even if we went through a couple of bad patches later on the season. Still give us a legitimate shot at home court advantage in the first round.
Yep. So, that press conference was very awesome to watch.
Let me address this. So, I've been saying this for 10 months, maybe. We're not going to be a tax team this year. And Neil actually said that. He said they were not going to be a tax team. He figured it out where he could sign the mid-level exception. The trade for Cantor brought in $3 more million that we sent out, which he addressed. And then he said he could sign 2 minimums and a rookie minimum. So he addressed, that's why we traded our pick. That's why we, signed Ellaby to the roster, because he was like the minimum possible salary. It sucks that we let Gabriel go, but a guy we'll talk about in a minute, getting Harry Giles in place of him, or Giles. I'm gonna mess that up.
And let me just say that because in the mailbag that I was referencing at the start of this video, I've always known as Giles, but I went back and watched that mailbag, and I said Giles every time I said his name, and I was like,
Really?
why? I knew it was Giles. I don't know why I was saying Giles. Hopefully we'll get that down.
But yeah, so he said, because Quick asked him, so will you be using the biannual exception? And he said, we don't have the biannual exception. And Quick was like, what? And then Neil's like, we couldn't use it and stay under the tax. Like, there was no way to do it. And he broke it down. He said they didn't want to be in the repeater tax for next year. So that gives me hope that they identified that they could have a really deep team this year, like we talked about all offseason, and still be under the tax and not have it affect moves in the future if they want to build upon their success from this season. So that gives me hope that they're not paying the tax now. He said it absolutely wasn't because of anything Jody wanted, like financially, but it was just to make it so they could be a player if they wanted to next year and not have to worry about the repeater
because
tax
repeater tax kicks in if you're in the tax too many years in a row, and it's just a far harsher financial penalty for the franchise. So yeah, you want to avoid that. Here's the thing. It didn't stop him from getting a lot of things done. He still made a ton of moves and filled out our rotation very well while also staying under the tax. Sure, Wheezy asks a great question. He says, given that Neil wants to stay out of the tax, do you see it less likely they make a splash trade at the trade deadline? And I think that might be possible, but here's why this Harry Giles signing is a really good signing, all right? I feel like he could step up and be our backup center. Or Collins could step up and be our backup center because we re-signed Carmelo. Having 2 potential rotation guys on minimum contracts would make it easier to like, okay, say we want a guy making like $25-26 million on the wing, and we're willing to like trade Rodney Hood and Derrick Jones Jr. All right, just hypothetical. They make almost $20 million a year. So if we got a guy making $25 million, then like we'd be $5 million into the tax. However, you can throw Cantor into that trade and shed another $5 million, match at 25 for 25. The problem is you'd have to fill out the roster, so then you'd still be into the tax. But you could easily part ways with a Cantor to keep your salary under the tax, knowing that you have a guy like a Harry Giles or a Zach Collins who doesn't have to play the backup forward because we have enough forward depth, able to step in there and play. So that's the thing. Like, having depth, legitimate depth on minimum contracts is really valuable, because if you do want to make a splash signing without going into the tax, you can, throw in a guy like a Cantor just to keep your salary out of the tax, and you have guys that can step up for him.
And one thing to add on to your filling out of the roster thing. So Neil basically said the exact number. I thought we were under the cap, which is $600,000, right? And he said they would not be adding any other like minimum contract players or anything like that. But that is just enough to sign a guy on the buyout market too. So we can be players on the buyout market and sign him to a prorated contract for the rest of the year at the minimum, and add another piece after the trade deadline as well.
Yeah, that would be interesting because and here's the thing: if we do a consolidation trade, like a Hood, Canner, Derrick Jones Jr. for something for like a legitimate small forward or something, then I assume okay, we'd probably have like one hole maybe to fill in the rotation. But we could be players on the buyout market then, if we make a splash move like that, we're probably contending level and could be like legitimate players on the buyout market and sign a guy on a prorated contract that barely makes a dent in terms of our salary, in terms of pushing up against the tax. So that's the thing is it doesn't rule out the possibility that we could make a splash signing or a splash trade at the deadline. It might be tough depending on like what the protections are on our first round pick, but you do have Hood and Derrick Jones Jr. adding up to almost $20 million in salary.
So according to Real GM, it's official. It is protected, lottery protected through 2027, and it turns into a second if not conveyed. But we're gonna make the playoffs this year, so it doesn't matter.
And here's the thing. We could probably at the trade deadline. The problem is it's Houston who could be competing against us. That's the only issue with it. But at the trade deadline, we could say, hey, Houston, we want to trade our 2023 first round pick, but we protected, because here's the thing, they can't trade any future first since their 2021 future first. If it's in the lottery, it becomes a 2022 future first. If that pick's in the lottery, it becomes a 2023 future first. If that pick's in the lottery, it becomes a 2024, and so on through 2027. And you can't trade first round picks after 2027 right now. So that's the thing, is like all our future picks are tied up backing up this protection in 2021. So we can't trade any of them. However, we could, at the deadline, if we know we're going to make the playoffs, we could try and call up Houston. Maybe we offer a future second or cash or whatever to incentivize them and say, Houston, if you take the protections off this pick, make it an unprotected pick, then we'll give you a second round pick. And then if you take the protections off that, then you could trade a 2023 future first or whatnot. The thing is, you don't want to have that pick unprotected because who knows what happens this season with injuries and whatnot. But at the trade deadline, you should be able to have a pretty good feel if you're going to be in the playoffs. Or you could like maybe reduce the protections on it and like open up future picks long term. You can mess around with the protections at the deadline. So it's not like they couldn't trade a future first. They just need to get Houston to agree to like change the protections on that pick.
Because if, let's say we called them and said, let's change it to like top 5 protected or something, because we're on the verge of making the playoffs, or we're for sure going to make the playoffs, and just in case like there was an injury and we fell out of the playoff race. So why wouldn't Houston want like the 12th pick instead of like the 20th pick the following year, because it's still protected, or possibly not getting it for several years? So yeah, there's no really reason for them not to do that.
The only reason would be like, oh, well, they need this pick to land this really good player, and we could be playing them in the first round. We're not going to help them land this really good player because they're competing against us. That's the only issue with that. If it was an Eastern Conference team, it'd probably be fine, but it's Houston.
We did that with Cleveland, so they owed us a future like top 10 protected pick, and they bumped it up a year just to make another trade. And that was the pick we used to get Swanigan. So it didn't really work out, but yeah, there is precedent for that kind of stuff happening.
Yeah. So
and then real quick, so people are taking like, why would someone take $600K? So Melo's making 1.6K. Harry Giles is making 1.6K, at least against the cap. It's prorated, so like the veterans get more money, but it doesn't go against our cap and stuff. But that's, if you sign in the middle of the year, it's prorated for how many games are left. And then we have on top of that the shorter season. So the fact that it's under the same cap rules as last year and the season is shorter. So, for example, Marvin Williams signed for $605,000 with Milwaukee last year. MKG with Dallas signed for $585,000. So, like those kind of guys, they get bought out of their contract. They're still making like both. MKG was making $13 million. He got paid that much to leave Charlotte and become a free agent. Marvin Williams was making like 15 something million. And then, so both of those guys got paid. So they don't care about getting another contract because they already got their money for that season. They just want to go to the best situation possible.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, Cantor signed with us 2 years ago because this was the best situation for him. And thankfully he did. But, like, something like that was the difference between if Nurk goes down and we don't have Cantor, there's no way we're making that run to the Western Conference Finals.
You sure? So, like, Myers was feeling himself in that Western Conference Finals. He might have averaged 30 a game. I don't know.
Yeah. But we would have had like any depth.
Yeah.
Like Myers would have been our own center, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it absolutely happens. Like almost every veteran, every once in a while, there's a team. Like, for example, we still have our biennial exception. Like, so if we wanted to go in the tax and there was someone that was an absolute difference maker, we could offer him like the full biennial exception and sign him maybe for 2 years even.
Yeah.
That is possible, but like for the most part, almost every veteran who gets bought out signs for a prorated minimum contract.
You know who will likely be our number one target on the buyout market? I want to see if you can guess who I'm thinking of.
Well, I'm guessing you're going to say Otto Porter.
Yes, Otto Porter would be like the number one target. He's prime for a buyout because it's going to be hard to trade him just because he makes so much money. So contending teams, it's going to be hard for them to match salary with pieces that they'd be willing to give up for Otto Porter. Thing is, Chicago sucks, so it's like a guy is going to be hard for them to trade, and they're probably going to be a lottery team, and it's going to make no sense, especially with like maybe a Patrick Williams at small forward, like a high draft pick that they might want to start the latter half of the season. Like, it's not going to make much sense for them to keep Otto Porter past the deadline on an expiring contract, so he's like the perfect candidate to get bought out, and he would be a great fit here. So that's the thing, is like if we consolidated and made some sort of trade, say we traded Derrick Jones Jr. and Rodney Hood for something, like I'd like to keep Hood, but if it's like a legitimate upgrade, I think you kind of have to do it. You got to try and contend. If we could do that for like a legitimate upgrade, stay out of the tax, and then we get basically one guy for those two, and then to replace the other one, buyout market, Otto Porter, which kind of plays the same position. He's more of a 3-4, but Otto Porter Jr. and Robert Covington has kind of been my dream forward pairing for like 2 years.
Yeah.
We have one of them now. Like, those two as starters would be phenomenal, I think. Otto Porter Jr. is like underrated defensively. He's not like a Covington defender, but he's probably a little better shooter, a little better off the dribble, has injury issues, right? So like Otto Porter Jr. off the buyout market would be great. You could even bring him off the bench potentially, But yeah, so that's the thing. Is like, it's not necessarily, this isn't the roster we're locked into. We could be creative around the trade deadline.
And there might be, because there's teams like OKC that just took on contracts. They don't even want those players. They just we're making trades to get picks. So there's going to be a lot of players that get bought out this year, I feel like. I mean, another option is Ariza could get bought out, and now that he's been traded like 18 times, we could actually sign him again.
Trevin, go ahead. Sorry.
Normally you can't trade. You can't sign someone after you trade them, but if they get traded again, then you can.
Yeah.
But then trying to think, did they end up with George Hill? Because someone mentioned that in the chat. Like, he's a guy who could possibly get bought out. Not sure if he would sign with us or not, but there's going to be a lot of options.
Yeah. Trevin said if we're trading Hood and Derrick Jones Jr., we'd probably be getting a new starter, so OPJ would be a bench player. That's a great point. OPJ off the bench would be, just make our bench even better.
We're not trading Hood and Derrick Jones Jr. We can't even do that right now. We're just saying
it's possible.
We'd possibly have a replacement on the buyout market, and that's why Neil left the $600,000 under the tax to get there.
And here's the
and
thing.
that's also why we're not going to sign and trade Whiteside, because that adds salary to our team.
Yeah. So there will be some options trade deadline. This isn't going to be like a trade deadline like, oh, we can't do a single thing, like nothing's going to happen. Like there's going to be some possible options. It's going to be fun, bro. It's going to be fun to think of new potential trade deadline options and stuff. I know that's like we're getting way ahead of ourselves and we should just be happy with this roster and just like, okay, what's this roster going to look like? But it's going to be fun to have like a new batch of potential moves, if that makes sense. Because that's basically what will happen around the trade deadline. We'll have like a new batch of just ideas and things we could potentially do. And I think Olshey has shown like, okay, we're going to try no matter what to get this team to a contender, even if it takes trading a Rodney Hood or whatever. So that's the thing is like those two guys add up to $19 million in salary. Derrick Jones Jr. is young, and if he's like playing well, maybe he could be a piece that team is like a rebuilding team is interested in due to his age. Rodney Hood could be an expiring contract. Like, yeah, you throw Canner in there, he's an expiring contract, and you have bigs to replace him. You could maybe make something happen in terms of the you could bring in a guy making like $23 million and then sign a buyout guy or two and stay under the tax.
Hood is technically expiring because his second year is non-guaranteed. So.
Yeah. So a team could waive him and wouldn't have to pay him next year. So he's basically expiring.
Neil did mention that he mentioned how a lot of the contracts line up with Nurkic's contract. You got Damon CJ locked up long term, and then you have several other contracts that end the same year.
Yeah, Covington's is a 2-year contract. Nurkic has 2 years left. Derrick Jones Jr. has 2 years left. Derrick Jones Jr. does have a player option, so he could decline it, I guess. But he has 2 years, and Hood has 2 years. If we, but here's the thing with Hood is like, I love having a 2-year contract it's basically a team option for the second year, because if you try and use it in trades and like a team doesn't want long-term salary, it's basically an expiring. If you keep him, you can basically keep him for 2 years if you want to. So it's the best type of contract to have for like a role player that you don't really like necessarily care if he's like locked up for 4 years. Like the best contract to have is a 2-year contract with a second-year team option, because you can trade it like an expiring, which a lot of teams value the trade deadline, or you can keep them for the rest of the year and then waive them, or you can keep them for 2 years if you want. So it'll be interesting, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but like this team, you would have to sort out the pick protections. But here's the thing, maybe we wouldn't have to trade a pick considering the young talent we have. If you throw a Derrick Jones Jr., if he plays well this year, he could be like a young prospect that a team views because he's only 23 right now. And then you look at like an Anthony, a Nasir Little, maybe even a Gary Trent Jr. if you're talking about like getting a legit player. I don't know. Like this, it'll be interesting to see just long term just how this roster kind of shakes out, because I could see them just kind of running all, not changing anything all season and being, and here's the thing, if they don't change anything, I won't necessarily be upset, which would be the first time at the trade deadline where I wouldn't necessarily be upset. If they're playing well, like they're kind of built to do better in the playoffs, and if they're being coached better, then I have more hope for a postseason than I've pretty much ever had. So that's the thing. Is like I'm not saying we need a trade at all, but
here's the thing to that is if we're planning on being a player on the buyout market and we have all this depth and cross your fingers, like injuries aren't an issue. There's going to be a guy, say like a Cantor, who's not part of the rotation, and we can afford to trade. And like there might be a team like last year we couldn't. It would have been a lot harder to trade Whiteside to say the Boston Celtics. I'm not saying the Celtics this year will need a center, whatever. I'm just giving an example. Last year, everyone thought Boston needed a center, but there was no salary that they were willing to give back to. They weren't going to trade a Smart or Gordon Hayward or any of those guys. So it didn't make sense like as them as a trade partner. But then you have an Enes Kanter making like $5 million. If he's having a solid year as a backup, there's just not minutes for him here. And we can afford to lose him because we have Collins back and Giles behind him. Then we can say, hey, maybe we can get like a second round pick for him or something. So it'd be kind of fun to be like a seller, but not because we're bad, if that makes sense. so yeah, it's kind of cool to think of the possibilities that way. But I have a feeling we're going to keep the roster mostly the same if we're doing well. The only way I see that happening is if we have to cover some depth because a certain position is ravished by an injury or something, and we need to flip one of our centers for like a backup guard or something like that. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but yeah, I think I like the way the team is set up that way.
Let's segue. I just want to look at this real quick. Okay, so that Trevor Ariza trade last season was such a good trade, not necessarily because of Ariza, but because of what we like turned that trade into. Because here's the thing, we traded basically Kent Bazemore and 2 second-round picks for Ariza. There was other pieces involved, but Wenyon's gone. Caleb Swanigan doesn't matter. Tolliver doesn't matter. It was basically Bazemore and 2 seconds for Trevor Ariza and the $7 million traded player exception, which we used on Enes Kanter, trading away Mario Hezonja, who another just completely irrelevant guy. So you can look at it like we basically traded Kent Bazemore 2 second-round picks for Trevor Ariza and Enes Kanter. That is a great return in that trade. And then, of course, we turned Trevor Ariza and 2 first-round picks into Robert Covington. But that trade, being able to basically get Ariza for Bazemore in 2 seconds, as well as get the tool that allowed you to basically get Enes Kanter for free, phenomenal trade.
Yep.
Phenomenal trade. That was a shrewd move to be able to because Olshey was creative. That was maybe one of his most creative trades because he structured it in a way where I think he used a small traded player exception to take on a salary to be able to use other guys to match in a way that create a $7 million traded player exception. I'm not going to be able to explain it without listing it all out, but basically Olshey was really creative in the way he structured that trade in order to manufacture that $7 million trade player exception. And what was I always saying? Olshey needs to be more creative in terms of maximizing his asset value, his asset yield. And he was creative in his creativity, manufactured a $7 million trade player exception that we now have a legitimate backup center that we got for that trade player exception.
Yep. And so I don't really like protecting a pick for 7 years or however long it is. But the fact is, if it turns into 1 second, if we never convey it, we'd have to not make the playoffs through 2027, which isn't going to happen. But as soon as we convey that pick, it'll have been 2 non-lottery picks we gave up for Robert Covington and an expiring 36-year-old contract, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of like that we restructured it in a way. It sucks, maybe possibly if we need to trade a first-round pick in the future. But as soon as we make the playoffs this year, I feel like it won't be an issue anymore because we'll have conveyed the pick and then we can trade whatever we want. And I mean, last draft kind of, I was disappointed because we didn't get Sadiq Bey, and I was also disappointed that we don't have a pick next year at all in the draft. Like I said, maybe we trade Kanter for a couple seconds or something at the deadline or whatever. But the fact that we gave up 2 non-lottery picks for him, I think, is a home run. And it's not gonna come back to bite us or anything like trading an unprotected first like some of these other teams did or whatever.
Yeah.
So someone was asking about protection. So, next year, so our pick is protected 1 through 14. So what that means is if we don't make the playoffs and we get, say, the 12th pick, then we would keep the pick. If we make the playoffs and we get the 20th pick, then it goes to Houston. And you protect it so just in case you suck and get the number 1 pick like the Warriors last year, if they would have traded an unprotected pick and then had all those injuries and had to give a team the 2nd pick in the draft, that would have been devastating for them. But instead, they didn't. They wouldn't have to if it was protected. So our pick next year is protected 1 through 14, which is basically the lottery teams. So if we make the playoffs, we'll send the pick to Houston. If we don't make the playoffs, we'll keep it. So if it's good, basically we get it. If it's bad, we send it to Houston.
Yep.
So I think that's a home run.
Yep. Let's talk about the Giles signing because after the Jerry Jones signing, I was like, okay, that's it. A couple random minimum guys. But we got Harry Giles on a minimum, which I was shocked to see, and I was ecstatic because this is a guy. All right, if you don't know Harry Giles' story. He was like the number one player in his high school class, a class including De'Aaron Fox, Jason Tatum. I forget who else was in that class, but it was, the class of those guys. Zach Collins was in that class. He was the number one player. Jason Tatum himself even said that Harry Giles was the number one player in that class. He dealt with his sophomore year, I believe. He tore his ACL in one of his knees. Came back his junior year, dominated, transferred to Oak Hill his senior year, and 2 minutes into his senior season at Oak Hill, he tore the ACL in his other knee. Went to Duke, didn't play for like the first half of the season because he had to have like surgery to clean up his knee like right before the season. Came back. He admitted that he wasn't 100% when he came back, so didn't play that well. Probably wasn't the best thing for his knees and his long-term health. And then you had, and then he got drafted into the NBA by the Sacramento Kings with a pick that we traded for Zach Collins. He didn't play at all his rookie season just to like strengthen his knees and, just as kind of like a precautionary thing. Played last year a bit, dealt with like a smaller injury. I forget what the injury was. And then played this past season, played 62 games, so was relatively healthy this past year. So he's kind of an injury-prone guy, but he was a guy that, if not for his injuries, could have been like a top 3 pick in the draft. And still has, I believe, like a ton of potential if he's able to be healthy and kind of, I don't know. I wonder like if he's still not 100% physically what he could be just because of the injuries and the toll they've taken on his body. So, this guy is upside wise to take a flyer, a minimum signing like this for kind of a third. Actually, he's like our 5th big. If Covington is the starting 4, he's basically our 5th big man. For a guy this talented,
6th probably.
6th, yeah, he's basically like the 11th man on our roster. To get a guy like this, for the 11th man on our roster, is a great get. Let me just read off some statistical things, and then I'll get Eric's take on it. Statistically, played 58 games his rookie season, shot 50% from the field, 64% from the free throw line, averaged 7 points per game, 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists. That was in only 14 minutes per game. This past season, in 14.5 minutes per game. He actually only played 46 games. That's my bad. I said 62. I don't know why. He dealt with another injury this year, but played more than half the games. But in 14 minutes per game...
There was less games, too.
Yeah, there was less games. That's something you have to remember. In 14.5 minutes per game, he averaged 6.9 points per game, 4.1 rebounds, 1.3 assists, shooting 55% from the field, and 77.6% from the free throw line, so his free throw shooting improved. All right, per 36 minutes this past season, here's where it gets intriguing, right? So, like, obviously his stats probably wouldn't be as good if he played this many minutes, but this was basically his production if it was, like, stretched out to 36 minutes a game. 17 points per game, 10 rebounds, over 3 assists per game, over a steal per game, and a block per game. All right, that is really good production, like on a per-minute basis that he was providing. His true shooting percentage this past season was 58%. He's looked at as an above-average defender. He can pass. Okay, this guy can pass. This guy like makes some of the passes that Nurkic makes. This guy is a special passer for like a center. So he kind of provides some consistency between Nurkic and him. He can shoot a mid-range. Can shoot it like as a pull-up too if he wants. Has a decent stroke. I think at some point he'll become a 3-point shooter. His ball handling ability is pretty good for a center position. He just has a lot of things that just are intriguing on both ends of the court, and you kind of see like why he was a highly regarded prospect. And if he just gets a chance, like, he could be really, really good. I don't expect him to be here long term because he's on a 1-year minimum contract, and either he'll play and show out and probably get paid more than we can afford, or he won't play and won't be happy and will want to leave regardless. I don't know. Like, long term, it's kind of but yeah, I mean, to get a guy like this as a flyer is phenomenal.
Yeah, so I was absolutely shocked. I was like, wait a minute, do we actually use the biennial exception, or like what is going on? Because, okay, I hate to talk about the Pistons again, but like, wouldn't you rather have a guy who, if is healthy, like is could bust out versus signing like a Mason Plumlee or like whatever the heck they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Or like OKC, you know, they're just going for picks and upside and stuff like that. Like, why wouldn't you bring this guy in for a couple $1,000,000? Like, you could have paid him a couple million more than we paid him. Or any of those like rebuilding type teams. Like, I'm so shocked that we got him for the minimum. I mean, I understand why he had to sign for the minimum, but like, I just it's weird that he chose us over. He had to have gotten several offers for the minimum if he was willing to accept that. So I'm surprised we actually even went after him, because I would have just assumed that he wasn't possible for the minimum. But yeah, so yeah, I love it because there's no risk. I mean, if he gets hurt or he gets into foul trouble, like has plagued him a little bit, similar to Zach Collins, like we have 4 centers on the roster, so like it doesn't hurt us like in the bubble when like Collins goes down and then we only have Nurk and Whiteside and they both get into foul trouble and we're playing like Wenyen and Melo at center. You know, like it's not going to hurt as bad this year because we have the depth behind him. So you can just ease him into the lineup. If he's healthy, you play him a little more maybe, and see what he's got. We don't have the rights to sign him next year for anything unless we use our mid-level exception on him. So like you said, it will be hard to keep him, but I could definitely see him showing out and then us like basically choosing him over Collins because he's been injury prone as well. So that might be a situation like where we traded Plumlee to Denver at the end of his rookie contract. Collins is coming into his last year of his rookie deal. If we decide some point in this season that Collins is not going to be on this team moving forward, we might as well try to get something for him. But that could be like the replacement for him that we wish Collins could have been. But I'm hoping both of them are healthy and they both show out this year, because that would really help our team depth-wise.
Oh, for real. And it's not like we'll be screwed if we don't have Collins or Harry Giles. That's the thing.
Right.
Like, we're still fine depth-wise. So,
Yep.
yeah,
even if they're both out, we still have 2 power forwards and 2 centers, so we're good. But basically, the Nurkic trade, ended up being Nurk and or Plumlee, a 2nd-round pick, and the number 15th pick for the number 10 pick, and Nurk and Harry Giles. So that's pretty good.
That's phenomenal. So let's mess around with some rotations to end this episode. I've set something up here. Let me switch over to it.
Real quick. So,
all right.
Yeah. Melo. I just want to say something about Melo because we didn't talk about him at all at the Olshey press conference. So Olshey said he was the most important signing to bring back. He loves his spirit and culture that he brings. But he also hinted that Melo will be coming off the bench, basically for all the reasons we've mentioned, that they need a scorer off the second unit. They want to try to preserve him so his health holds up more than playing 32 minutes a game, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of like what he said. He did say he was going to leave it up to Neil who plays and who starts, which leads me to believe they didn't promise him anything, which I like. And but he had nothing but good things to say about Melo. And for the last time, it's not disrespectful to say that we want Melo scoring off the bench versus starting, and him not fitting in as well off the bench as starting as opposed to off the bench. Like, if you like Melo, don't you want him to feast off second units? I don't get that. Like, he's gonna look better feasting off of like worse players. But yeah.
Let me just.
But
all right.
He had a lot of good things to say about him.
All right, let's transition over here. This is kind of like glitching out, so that's why the screen's all weird on Eric's side. Okay. This is what I got in terms of something that we can use to basically mock out like a minute by minute rotation. All right, let me. No, let's go here. Oh, okay, there we go. There we go. I don't know why it's glitching on me. I set this up beforehand and it's glitching. But I want to set up minute by minute rotations, a couple different ones, like ones to start the season, with Collins being out, and just kind of see what things could potentially look like here. So I think that's probably pretty good. Fit to screen. There we go. There we go. Yeah, that'll be good enough. And then maybe I can zoom out a little bit. There we go. Okay, perfect. So this is kind of, I haven't finished building this, but this is kind of what I got. All right. It's not completely finished. So start of the season lineup. These are kind of like the minute goals I'd want to go for at the start of the season in terms of playing. Maybe like Canner and Carmelo closer to 20 and Giles to 12 if you want. But something that I think, okay, this is what I want them to do. All right. And this is kind of different than what they've always done. CJ's going to be the backup point guard. This red is basically the point guard minutes. Orange is a shooting guard. They should stagger them and play CJ with the bench unit right here. But I would honestly keep CJ in the game next to Dame and then sub him out like with 4 minutes left in the first half. The reason why is I want to get Nurkic some minutes with Derek Jones, and I think it would be best to pair these two during the time where one of Dame and CJ is resting. Because here's the thing. When Dame and CJ are on the floor together, they dominate touches, right? If one of them's off, you have more touches to go around. That means you could utilize Nurkic more as a passer, and that means, the Nurkic connection with a Derek Jones Jr. Would be intriguing just because of how athletic Derek Jones Jr. is. You'd want to see him moving like we moved Layman around. Also, Derek Jones Jr.'s lack of spacing wouldn't be as big of a problem, I feel like, if only one of Dame and CJ were on the floor. So that is kind of my thought in terms of like this first half right here. What do you think about that, Eric?
Yeah, it's not bad. They don't have Melo playing at all.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that yet.
I just wanted to make sure people understood it wasn't finished.
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
Yeah, it was kind of unclear. I mean, like I said, I get the feeling that Melo is going to be coming off the bench. We know Dame, CJ, Rocco, and Nurk are starting for sure. So that small forward spot is just going to depend on. He made it sound like it was going to be an open competition between Hood and Derek Jones Jr., but I don't know if Hood is going to be 100% ready, so they might bring him off the bench to start with. So, yeah, a little bit of tweaking maybe there, but like you said, you're not necessarily wanting them to play with Dame and CJ and Nurk all together. But what I want to see is, I love the way you have it set up. But sometimes I want Dame to be the first one out. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
I don't want him to just say, okay, it's a 6-minute mark, CJ, you're coming out, even if he's 10 for 10 and has 20 points in the first quarter, So I want to see him kind of mix it up. Sometimes hey, Dame's kind of off tonight, or CJ's got it cooking. Let's pull Dame and let Dame run with the second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to be more flexible that way.
I mean, and you could be you'd basically just
absolutely.
mirror CJ, where CJ would stay in during this stretch and Dame would sit, and then Dame would come back in here or whatever. You know what I mean? This is just kind of just a rough outline where, normal game, this is kind of the flow to go with. Let me fix that, and then...
And for those asking about Ant, see, this is the problem. Whose minutes are you cutting to play Ant? Because it would have to be either Dame, CJ, or Trent in this situation. So you're going to cut Trent even lower than 24? Are you going to cut Dame and CJ's minutes just to play Ant more? My hope is that we actually don't have as many close games as we have in the past, so that we can afford to play Lillard and McCollum closer to 30 minutes, and then that leaves 8 or 9 minutes for Ant to get some run at point guard.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there isn't a lot of opportunity for Ant to get playing time unless he is so good in practice that he wins the backup point guard over CJ, and we only have to play Lillard and CJ 32 minutes minutes a game, but I don't see that necessarily happening right now. I think it's going to be more like the bubble where he didn't really play until we absolutely needed him to.
Yeah, there's just not enough minutes to go around for a backup point guard. That's why everybody's like, we need to sign a backup point guard. Like, no, we don't. I mean, it would be good for like insurance purposes, but we got CJ as our backup point guard, Anthony is our third string. Basically, is how that's gonna go. So I'm just trying to figure things out minutes wise for these guys.
Definitive one, Zach is out until at least mid-January, so we don't have to worry about him in the rotation. My guess is he'll take basically Giles minutes and a little bit of Cantor's and Anthony's if he's healthy and ready to go. If not, we'll probably just be really cautious with him and only play him a few minutes.
Are you okay with Giles at the 4? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah, because with Cantor and Nurk, it doesn't leave a lot of minutes at center. So yeah, I'm cool with him splitting. You know, like maybe 5 minutes at center and 10 minutes at power forward. Yeah,
I wouldn't play Giles at the 4 with Derrick Jones Jr. in the game, because then I feel like your spacing is getting too. It's gonna struggle. So I have Giles playing some 4 here, 5 minutes of 4, but it's with Covington and McCollum on the floor there, and it's with Covington and Trent on the floor here, so you have the shooting necessary to be able to make that work. So, yeah, I mean, just get the man time, you know, and if he struggles, if this lineup doesn't work, you can cut Giles minutes and, you know, maybe increase Carmelo's or something. This is just kind of like start of the season. This is what I'd like to see them go with. I'll build the second round, but what do you think, like, is there anything I should change first half?
No, but Neil did specifically say that they didn't want Anthony playing more than 20 to 22 minutes a game. So this seems about right for him. So all the people who are saying, oh, Anthony should be playing like 30 minutes, that's crazy. It's not necessarily because he's not going to deserve minutes, but he did say that based on his ability to hit clutch shots, which he did pretty much every game in the bubble, that he has no problem with Anthony earning a role in the closing unit. And that if he's going off some games, you know, we all know Carmelo, he can get it going and be incredible and unstoppable for a while. So if he's cooking, you leave him in a little longer. And then some games, you know, maybe he's having one of his 1 for 10 games and you don't play him as much. And then they thought it was really important to have him fresher for the playoffs. And that's something we said all last year about our guys like playing way too much, especially the older guys like Carmelo Anthony getting like 32 minutes a game was crazy. We didn't really have a lot of options, I guess, but yeah, we can't do that to that guy this year.
Yeah, agreed on that end.
And yeah, like Thomas Oransky says, Olshey said he talked to Melo about all that stuff before he signed, and Melo still wanted to sign here over. He said he had multiple offers for the minimum, so
awesome.
Yeah.
And cool that a guy like that wants to stay here once he's here.
Yeah, how cool is it to have a Hall of Famer like choose us over going to the Lakers or whatever team that you could have gone to?
A guy that turned us down too consistently, and now, now he doesn't want. Now he's choosing us over. Did the Lakers offer?
I don't know specific teams, but he said there was he implied that there was like a third of the league basically. So
This minutes breakdown for Nurkic is kind of weird.
I'd be fine too with playing like shorter spurts for everyone. Might be a good idea too to help keep them fresh. And then just like I said, if someone's got to go and you leave them in a little longer than expected, and then if someone's struggling, you just be like, you know what, it's not your night, but that's okay because we have so and so to lift you up. Don't worry about it. We'll get them next time. You know.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like a bad thing. You just keep everyone fresh that way.
Yeah, it makes sense. How many minutes a game would you play Nurkic at the start of the season? Just out of curiosity.
I would play him somewhere between. Honestly, I would play him up to 30 minutes if he's fine. But the way he got gassed, or gets gassed easily, if you could bump that down to 24-ish and still be okay, that would be really nice. But I think, yeah, like right in that 27 to 28 range in the middle of those two numbers, I
Yeah.
think would be perfect.
What about something like this? What about something like it might not have updated yet, but something like playing him with a little bit with the bench unit, shorter spurts, like you said.
Yeah, I like it.
So that'd be 7, that'd be 14, and then um, could do it again because like I like his pairing next to Derek Jones Jr. and this would kind of make it so that we almost always have one of Damon CJ on the court at least in that first half, um, and then you could do something like you could do something like this, and then I just need to see how many minutes this is. That's 6, 10, 15, 14. That's 29 minutes right there for Nurkic.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a good split. And then you basically play Canner in 2 shifts. That would basically leave 19 minutes for Canner. I feel like I don't know, man. It's just weird with Giles because like he's more of a for me he's more of a center than a power forward. So it's like do you want to get him minutes bad enough that you just slot him in at the 4? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it'll be hard to get him like 15 minutes to start the season just because we have the depth at center and him.
Well,
if he could shoot threes better, it'd be better. But
if you had like Trent and Rocco at the 2 and 3 when he plays, then you have like 2 good perimeter defenders that might not be quite as bad. But yeah, I have a feeling they're at the beginning of the year. I mean, this doesn't make sense because Collins isn't there, but his minutes might be kind of sporadic throughout the year, unless he's like so good you have to play him, you know?
Yeah, and here's the thing: this is gonna become more of a challenge when Collins is healthy. That's the problem with this. So I think center rotation is solid here. The thing is, Collins can play the 4 though, so you can maybe make things work. I think power forward rotation. Are we missing minutes anywhere? No, we're not. So that would get Giles. That would get Giles 7 minutes a game.
You're missing at the end of the games, the last 6 minutes. There's only
not 4. The small forward. I'm just looking at the power forward minutes right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, with Carmelo at the 4 and Rocco playing the 4, you'd have to play Rocco at more 3. Maybe you do something like this actually, like we did in the first half, where you would move Rocco over to the 3 right here.
Yeah.
And you could get Giles like a 5-minute run at the start of the half.
Yeah.
Or if Carmelo played well in the first half, maybe you'd sub Carmelo in here instead of with 2 minutes left in the third.
Honestly, I can't. I think we have to go back to probably 99, 2000, the last time we almost made it to the finals. For this much depth or like this kind of problem to have, you know?
Yeah, it's just weird, man. So, all right, if these are set as Trent's minutes, that's 6, 10, 12. That's 12 each half. No, that's 12 the first half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11. So that's 23. 23 minutes for Trent. Do you think he deserves more? Do you think he deserves 25?
I think Trent deserves more.
All right, I can get him.
It's going to be hard to give it to him.
I'll fully update these totals.
We broke Dame Dollar's brain again. Like every time we do.
What's broken about your brain here, man? We're building a rotation. I think the only minutes left to allocate are the small forward minutes here.
Dame Dollar plays 2K, right?
Yeah, this is like a feature in 2K.
See, yeah, I think so. I think this is like what their game plan will be, something like this. But I think they'll like leave the last 6 minutes open for, especially at small forward maybe, and just let like if Trent's if Trent's having a good game, you close with him. If Hood's having a good game, you close with him. If Melo's having a good game, you close with him. Like there's so many options, and that's what makes this so nice. Like there's literally not really a wrong answer for who to play where, and
Yeah.
that's crazy considering last year we had like Anthony Tolliver and Mario Hazonia starting at times and like
Yeah.
or playing big minutes, but yeah, this is really really fun to do this kind of thing. But yeah, if you because I had Trent getting 26 minutes, so yeah, basically right along the lines of what you have. So, by taken away from Giles a few minutes, but basically similar.
So we need 2 more minutes here at the small forward. It could be Covington. It could be. I mean, like, here's the thing. If it's playing well, you sub him in here and then sub Covington in there. If Covington's playing well, you sub him in here. If CJ's playing really well, maybe you sub him in here and play Trent a little bit at the 3 there. So, like, I don't know. Let me just check the minutes. Right now, 7, 11, 15, 19. You got 19 for Jones. You got 21 for Hood. You got Carmelo with 17. You got Giles with 10, which I think is a solid number for Giles. You got
It also
Nurkic with 29. Covington 6.
like we're in a position too, which we've never had, where we could win games getting stops maybe instead of trying to like having to score, which is nice because then you put in Jones and you basically have like Lillard with Trent, Jones, and Covington, and either Nurk or probably Nurk in that situation, and then like maybe you get 3 stops that you normally aren't used to getting, and all of a sudden you don't even need 3-pointers, so it doesn't matter that Jones can't shoot threes because you're getting stops on the other end. But that's a great problem to maybe have.
So, all right, so this is finished rotation. This is what the minutes would look like with this rotation. I'm pretty happy with this relatively because you have Derrick Jones Jr.'s minutes are all coming with only one of Dame or CJ on the floor. You got 4 minutes here with Nurkic, 4 minutes here with Nurkic, 4 minutes there with Nurkic. So 12 out of his 19 minutes would be played next to Yusuf Nurkic, which would be ideal. And 2 of the minutes where he's not playing next to Yusuf Nurkic, Harry Giles is also on the floor, who's a solid passer. Of course, that's with Harry Giles at the 4, but Harry Giles needs to shoot more threes. His stroke is too good to not be shooting more threes, I feel like. So I feel like that's something he'll do here. So maybe you can space the 4 well enough. And he's decently quick. He can guard the 4. So like rotation wise, you got you got Hood and like Covington kind of only playing 2 stints. You got CJ playing 3, Nurkic playing 3. The only times where only one of CJ, Dame, or Nurkic are on the floor is 5 minutes here and 4 minutes there. And in the first half, you got 6 minutes there, and that's it. So 9, 15. Only 33 minutes, you'd have 2 of the 3 on the floor. 15 minutes, you'd have only 1 of the 3 on the floor. So I think that's pretty ideal. What do you think of this chat? Because I haven't been reading chat because I got this up and everything. Let me actually open up chat, put it on the other screen. Wow, we got a lot of people here. Giles should get around 12. I mean, if he's playing well and Carmelo is struggling, then maybe you wait to sub Carmelo in until like the end of the third and you give Giles like a couple minutes here. Maybe you sub him out early here and give Giles a couple minutes. Like if Giles is playing well, you'll be able to get him more minutes. It's just hard to like sort it out because I mean, this is the minute breakdown. It's like, yeah, a lot of these guys probably deserve a few more minutes than they're getting, but this is
like you mentioned, Cantor, or you wanted Giles to play more at center. So, I mean, if Giles is playing well and earning minutes, you just reduce Cantor's role and switch those two. And maybe Giles plays 19 minutes and Cantor plays 10 minutes, or
Yeah.
maybe not even at all some games. You could actually do a thing where, I mean, this has never been an option for the Blazers to load manage, and I kind of hate that, but like you could say like, okay, one game Cantor's going to play 25 minutes, and the next game Giles is going to play 25 minutes or whatever, and then the other person rests that game and only plays if needed or whatever. So yeah, there's lots. You can do different ways. They don't have to play like exactly 10 minutes every game or whatever. Like some people seem to think like these are set numbers in stone. Like it's totally flexible, and that's what's cool about having flexible lineups and players that can play different positions.
I don't know why I'm saying this. So when Collins returns, all right, let's tweak this for when Zach Collins returns. If Zach Collins returns, it's going to be Harry Giles isn't going to be getting minutes. Like, unless he outplayed Collins, and then Collins wouldn't be getting minutes. You know what I mean? But basically, like, assuming Collins comes back, gets his way into the rotation, we can actually. Why did I go there? Come on. Okay, return to Collins. We can actually just slide these up. Slide these up. Slide them up. Scroll it. You can slide this up. And Collins makes more sense to the four, so it's probably a little easier to slot things in. Who would you take minutes from in this situation though? Because you're like Hood's gonna be like have his legs under him more. Like,
I would probably say maybe like 1 minute from Covington, 1 minute from Nurk, and then almost all, or like maybe 15 or so minutes from Cantor.
15 from Cantor, huh?
And then just move like, you put Collins at 10.
Yeah, I gave him Giles minutes.
Not if Collins already has 10 in there, then I was saying like if you're trying to choose between Giles and Cantor, because who knows, Giles might be the choice over Cantor at this point.
Yeah.
But so yeah, if you took a minute from Covington, McCollum, and Nurkic, that's 3 more minutes, and then maybe like 5 minutes from Cantor, you get him up to 18 minutes, and then
Here's what's tough with that is like just based on the sub patterns, it's like kind of weird to like do that. You know what I mean? Just with the sub patterns. So, we'll take a minute from Nurk. Well, we'll take a minute. Like, is that not enough minutes to only play him 5 to start the game?
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Because that'd be the easiest.
If they play like they did in the bubble, they're all getting foul trouble. So they, I expect that to improve just because they won't have so much pressure with people driving with how good the perimeter defense should be. So,
I think the easiest way to cut these minutes would be to do something like this. Let me fix this. I'm too OCD about like making this line up. Okay. So maybe you could do something like.
Shervins, I thought the 2014-15 roster was pretty close, especially after the Aflalo trade. Probably not this good or deep. But then I also I think we probably have to go back to the 1 year where Odin was somewhat healthy, and you had Roy and Aldridge. Those guys went like I think it was like 50 and 10 or something like that, 52 and 10 or 60 and 12 or something like that, 50 and 12 together. So, but it's kind of hard to say that roster was as good because they all got hurt. So yeah, probably going back to 99, 2000. So we got two people in chat taking bets, guaranteeing that Melo will be the starter.
Okay, do you guys want to pay me? Literally, our GM
All right.
literally said that Melo is not gonna start. Our general manager, all right? I think he probably knows who his team's gonna start more than you guys. Just a gut feeling, though. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
All right. All right. So, let's see. Who is it? Jeremy Harris? Are you on Twitter, or do you follow me on Twitter?
If we get any delusional Melo fans in here, just put them in timeout. I'm not dealing with
No,
that.
it's not delusional. It's just yeah, it's fine.
I'm
I'm just
just
asking if he follows me on Twitter.
I'm just okay. It's delusional if you're gonna argue that Melo is gonna start when our GM literally just said that he ain't gonna start. Like that's just the way I view
Well,
that.
technically, he says it's up to Stotts, but we talked to him that, and he's fine coming off the bench, and that's what we feel is his best role. But yeah, um, I'm waiting for. Okay, Block Boy, I'll give you the proposition for me. Okay, so let's just do a Twitter bet. If Melo starts game one, opening night, I will make a Twitter post praising that you are the ultimate basketball knowledgeable fan, and I will bow down at Melo's greatness in my tweet and say nothing but good things about him that entire night. No, not even if he goes 1 for 15 in the game, I will say he's the best player ever. And if Melo does not start, you have to make a post and tag Blazers Uprise in it and tell them that these guys actually tell the whole world that these guys actually know what they're talking about. Is that fair?
Oh my goodness.
All right, deal, Blockboy. Sounds good.
Alright.
Same goes to the other guy who was saying Melo would start, but I don't know if he's on Twitter or not. Blockboy's got a lot of followers though, man.
Does he? Good for him. Congrats. I feel like this is not enough minutes for Canner though. I could do something.
I don't know.
The minutes breakdown is so hard.
I don't feel like Canner has to play because, like I said, a lot of games he didn't even play for Boston, or he played, sparse minutes.
Well, here, this gives him 13 minutes if you do something like this. That's 3, 7, 13 for Nurkic first half. We can do 15 the second half. That's 5, 9, 13, 14, 15. We could do that. And then Collins could be like the center for this stretch.
Why don't you have Ellaby on this?
Why would I?
Just good.
Why would I?
So,
5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. All right. 5. There's 4 here. I need a small forward.
do you know what bothers me about? So Alvaro wants us to get media passes so we can ask questions and these things.
Yeah.
Which even it should be easier with the Zoom things versus actually being there or whatever. But the thing that bugs me is like, okay, so we have all these like beat reporters and people who cover the team. Not one of them even knows if we offered a qualifying extension to Wenyan, what a qualifying offer is probably. They probably have no idea what a two-way contract is, and if we're planning on using those two-way contracts, or asking Neil if we're gonna, when he says our roster is done, like there's no follow-up, like, hey, we still have two-way contracts available for basically that you could have players on the team this year, or do you plan on using those since they could be with the team the entire year? None of that. Like, oh, what about Jalen Horde? He's still out there. Are you thinking about bringing him back on a two-way? None of those kind of questions. Yeah, it'd be nice to like actually have someone who knows the CBA and rosters and stuff that could ask them questions like that.
Yeah, I agree. 1, 2, 19, 20. don't need these. Could probably do. Why does that have CJ? No, what's that?
Blockboy, I see you fighting with the Blockboy loves River City Project. I'll just put that out there. You and Tori have that in common.
Is he beefing with them?
Dude, yeah. So both Quick and Fentress got owned at points at the press conference. Oh, it was so great. Because we didn't talk about this yet, but Jason Quick was like, I see you still do not have a veteran backup point guard on this team. And he's like, Anthony Simons is our backup point guard. And he's like, but he's like, nope, Ant's our backup point guard. We still feel good about him. He's our backup point guard. We don't need a veteran because Ant's better than all of them. And Quick was like, and then Fentress asked a good question, but he asked it in like such a stupid way. Like he was trying to ask basically like, we have all this depth. Is that going to become like an issue, or like how do you plan on keeping everyone happy? But he said it like, oh, you have a lot of forwards. What's that like? And something. And Olshey's like, well, can you name our forwards? And then Fentress is like, oh, well, you have Covington and you have Hood and you have and he just like listed them, but it was so dumb. But like, yeah,
that's funny. Good old media man. All right, let me count the minutes. Right now, you got McCollum at 33. You got Lillard at 35. You got Covington at 12. 15, 20, 26. You probably need more for Covington. I'll adjust this after I count these. What were you going to say?
The other thing he said about the Anthony Simons thing was, and not needing a backup point guard, he said 95% of our possessions in games where Dame and CJ played, one of those two was handling the ball. So there was no need to have a veteran backup point guard when 95% of your offense is run through those two guys. So yeah. I don't think it needs to be that high, but like it also like clarifies that there's no need to have the backup, and it pretty much ensures that CJ is the backup point guard, which he is.
Yeah.
And for all those saying that Ant should play, the only way you can do it is if you take minutes from basically CJ or Gary Trent, and we're already talking about. Are people
still saying that?
Well, Zane for one.
Bro, Zane, do you see how hard it is to even sort out and get enough minutes for all these guys? Harry Giles ain't even the rotation. How are we going to add Ant and get everybody enough minutes? Like, you're going to play Trent like 18 minutes a game to play Anthony? I don't think that's a good option. You bench Anthony, you play Trent 25 minutes a game. Like
if we're up by like 15 or something, maybe you could bring Ant in as the backup point instead of CJ, and just like maybe you can scrape out some minutes every once in a while. I just don't think he's going to have a lot. But here's the thing. So for Muhammad and stuff, people saying trade him. Like, no, we want Anthony Simons and Little on this team because they don't have a lot of trade value, but they can still pop, and we're going to lose some of this depth in the coming years. So then if those guys are still on the team under their rookie contracts and they can step up into a role, you want those guys to pop on our team if they do. And being in practices with all these good players, they're going to have to either step up or they're going to be it's going to be obvious that they're a little lost. So you want to have a couple guys on this team that have massive potential for the future. I still think Little and Anthony can become good players in this league. I just don't think that it necessarily makes sense to play them much this year.
All right, what do you? Let me actually do it like this, just to make things in order. What do you think of this minutes breakdown wise once Collins comes back? Probably Melo not playing enough, you think?
Well, I know a couple of people are going to say that. um, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think maybe Collins will play a little more, or I mean, not Carmelo will play a little more, and Cantor will play a little less. Maybe get Cantor closer to 12 and Anthony closer to 19, and that would make Collins play more backup center versus more power forward. But that's just a small tweak that'll probably happen just based on the gravitas of Melo and like just
Yeah.
the person he is. He'll probably earn more minutes than 15 just because of who he is. But overall, I like it.
Yeah, I mean, could be here. But I don't know. I'm always kind of like playing guys like 7 minutes in the first half and 3 in the second. Are you like cool with that? Or is that just kind of, I feel like that's kind of weird to do.
To do what?
Play like a guy 7 minutes in the first half and only 3 in the second if he has like a consistent role. But I guess that's something you could do.
Yeah.
So you could do something like this then. Copy paste. You could easily do. Let me crop this.
I feel like behind the scenes, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but the way Neil talked today, it was almost like Stotts went to him and was like, "Hey, Neil, can you get me some better players or something if you want me to do better?" And he's like, "Okay, here you go, STFU."
Yeah. Yeah. And then he's like call it out like his scheme and stuff. Because, bro, I was shocked when I heard that. I never thought I'd hear anything like that.
Yeah.
That was shocking. Is that what it is now? 4, 7, 10. Yeah, alright, there you go. There you go. That's the rotation when Collins comes back then. Is that ideal, you think?
Yeah, I think that was pretty good.
If Trent is playing well, then maybe you sub in Rodney Hood for a couple minutes here to get Trent a breather, and then you sub Trent in to play with the ending lineup if he's having a good game or something like that. Obviously, like stuff can move around, but yeah, I mean you basically got Nurkic playing 29 center minutes, Cantor playing 10, leaving 9 backup center minutes for Collins. And Collins plays some 4, mostly all his 4 minutes come next to Cantor, which I think is ideal because Collins can help cover for Cantor's defense. You got Derek Jones Jr. playing some minutes with Nurkic and playing with the bench unit, not with both Dame and CJ, just one of them with some minutes matched up with Nurkic who can play make for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna cut minutes from someone here, it would probably end up being Derek Jones if he's not utilized properly.
Mm-hmm.
But if he is utilized properly, I could definitely see him earning at least 20 minutes, if not more.
Yeah, here's the thing about this though, like you can take away this, right? If he's not being utilized, right, that gives him to 16.
Yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17. Oh, I counted his minutes wrong. He's actually at 21. But you could take this away, and you could play Zach here if he's playing well at the 4, move Covington down to the 3 and Hood down to the 2. You could sub Trent back in here at the 2. You could sub in Carmelo at the 4, move Covington to the 3, Hood at the 2. So whoever's playing like well first half could take these minutes from Derek Jones Jr. So like he is at 21, but that'd be like the first guy to get his minutes cut for somebody playing well. It sets us up in a position where like he's like the guy we have slotted in here, but these minutes could basically go to anybody because you have Hood that can play the 2 or 3 and you have Covington that can play the 3 or the 4. So you can slide these guys down to the 2 and 3 if you want to play a 4. If you want to play a 3, you can slide Hood down. Hood's already playing the 2 here. Like Hood's at the 2, Covington's at the 4 here, Derek Jones Jr. is at the 3. So if you want to play a different 3, you could do that. If you wanted to play a 2, like a Gary Trent Jr., or say McCollum's hot, it doesn't give him a ton of rest, that half, but you could slide Hood back up to the 3 from the 2, if that makes sense. So yeah, like that's the thing, is the lineup should be structured in a way where like you have minutes that you can set aside, take from somebody right here and give to somebody else, like a Gary Trent Jr. or like a Collins or a Carmelo. And the thing that's nice is like Carmelo and Gary Trent Jr. would probably be the first 2 people to receive these minutes if you took them away from Derrick Jones in this lineup, and they aren't in the game before this. So it's like if you sub Gary Trent Jr. in, he would have had a 3-minute rest before that and then would play those final 4. Or if it's Carmelo, you would have a 3-minute rest before that, play the final 4. Make sense?
Yep.
So ideal lineup when Collins comes back is something like this. Like if Canner's playing well, you could sub Canner in here for Collins, you know?
Yeah.
He could get 10 minutes this half, and if he's still playing well in this stretch, you could keep him in here, or you could give him these minutes if he's out playing Collins. It kind of depends on matchups. So that's the thing. It's going to be a lot of situational stuff, but we have the players that play different positions that you can kind of slot guys around in a intriguing and productive way, in my opinion.
You know what else too?
What's up?
There is no reason not to hold people accountable on the defensive end for once, right? So you talk about in the past, we just haven't had the deep enough roster to hold like a Dame or CJ accountable for defense. But if CJ or, it could be anyone, Rodney, Dame, like whoever, if they're like falling asleep on the rotations and not staying focused on that defensive end, then you say, hey, look, you're not guaranteed minutes, like you need to be locked in on defense at all times. And we have 11 guys that are all fighting for minutes, and we're going to play the guys who are focused, and it might help keep everyone's focus from happening. Because that was a theme of last year, is just people falling asleep on defense, not being held accountable, not boxing out, all that kind of stuff. There's no excuse to allow that kind of stuff and still play those guys major minutes or give them minutes over people who are doing those things, because we have guys who can step in if they're not doing their job properly. So yep. I love that that just puts more pressure on the coach, because he has the tools to not allow that. So if he keeps allowing that to happen, and we have games where people are literally just turning and standing and watching the ball bounce off the hoop, and one guy runs in between 4 of our guys and grabs a rebound and puts it in, those kind of things should not be acceptable when you have a deep roster like this. And it'll be fun to see if people are held accountable for doing stuff like that. Yep.
Definitive on what software was I using for what? The lineup, so I was using Photoshop. And for streaming, it's Streamlabs OBS. It was just like randomly, like, I don't know. It was like glitching out, like switching things between my 2 displays here. That's why like stuff was over Eric's face, and I was, I don't know, it was like switching off. But yeah, I got a second monitor now, so I actually have my whole screen here. It's nice. And also that's why if I'm looking to the right, it's because I'm watching Eric talk, because he's like here. So I didn't know if any of you were wondering about that, but yeah, so anyway, I'll tweet those out like probably tomorrow or something. I'm gonna like save this picture just as lineups, and I can go back to this and like edit it depending on injuries and whatnot throughout the season.
Good night, Zane.
So yeah, thank you all for tuning in for the stream. It was a fun stream. Lots to talk about. We'll stream Thursday's Thanksgiving, but I'm not doing anything for Thanksgiving, so I don't know about a Thursday night stream. I don't know what your plans are, but I am literally not celebrating Thanksgiving. So if you're doing stuff, then maybe I'll stream on my own if y'all want.
I'm doing stuff with the family, but that's early in the day.
Stream. I can do a solo stream if I need. I'll run solo. I'll fly solo for
9 o'clock. Everyone's in bed anyways.
Yeah. Just no Thanksgiving really this year, which is kind of sucks. But probably stream for y'all and talk more about maybe the some few more free agency things from the general NBA. Like we didn't really talk about like Cousins signing with the Rockets, and we should kind of have a little bit more clear picture by then. So that'll be what's on tap for Thursday. Yeah, follow me at Tory Jones YT if you don't already. That's for Twitter. Follow Eric at HoopsJock. Our channel page is at Blazers Uprise YT. Remember that YT on the end. And that's how you can get updates and whatnot. We'll drop a couple more videos this week, 2 or 3 or so. Maybe talking about like the Harry Giles signing. I'll probably do a video on that. I just did one on the Derrick Jones Jr. signing. So if you haven't watched that, go check it out. Eric is going to do the mailbag at some point. If you want to ask a mailbag question, go to the community tab on our main Blazers Uprise page. That's where I posted the prompt for you guys to post your questions on for that mailbag video. Other than that, there's not really anything else left to plug. Am I forgetting something?
No, I think you got it. Alvaro, ask that question on the mailbag prompt.
Yeah, if you have unanswered questions, go to that community tab and put them in there for Eric. Thank you guys for this was a record-breaking stream for the streaming channel. The streaming channel is starting to gain traction, which is pretty cool, because I did want to separate the channels. It's kind of so, having things over here for a bit, trying to grow this because not a lot of people knew we had a second streaming channel, but having the second streaming channel helps our videos on the main channel do better, basically. I'm not going to get into why, I've talked about it before, but that's why we do have the second channel. It's just nice that now we could stream here and we got 150 viewers in here, which would have been great for a post-game show last year when we were struggling and nobody really cared about the team. Now everybody is excited. I'm excited for this upcoming season. We'll have you covered. So, it's only right around the corner. Can't wait.
Kind of reinvigorated everyone because people were excited about coming off the Western Conference Finals last year. And, we were starting the channel, but then you had the Nurkic injury looming over the season, and then you have Hood and Collins go down early in the season. And we got a little bit of spark, at least from people watching the channel based on the Melo signing. People like Block Boy wouldn't be here watching us if we didn't sign Melo. So we got a little bit of spark from that, but just the fact that we were below 500 most of the year was really a lot of people tuned out and weren't watching a lot of games. So it'll be fun to have a good team, and hopefully we're back in the race for the one of the top seeds in the West, and we'll all be along for a ride together as a community. It'll be fun.
Yeah, don't jinx us having a good season, because we thought we were going to have a good season last year, and hopefully it's a lot better than last season. We kind of got brought back down to earth a little bit after that Western Conference Finals run. So, hopefully we have a good season. It'll be fun for the channel. It'll be fun for the community, and it'll be good for all of us. So, anyway, until we catch you next, hope you guys have a good rest of your night and a good week ahead. Until then, peace out. Go Blazers.